Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. No expense spared. We've dipped into the budget and we've spent all our money to get Shaka Hislop today. And it's an international free zone because Trinidad and Tobago lost to Canada on Saturday and Scotland were unfortunate in losing 4-0 to the Netherlands and 1-0 to Northern Ireland. How are you, big lad?
I'm better after that introduction. Misery loves company, Mark, as you know, and it's been a tough international break. For me, happy to be alongside you and join in that misery.
At least we've qualified for the Euros, Shaka. I don't see Trinidad.
All right. Okay, we didn't qualify for the Euros either.
Yes, never mind. You played at the World Cup. Yes, let's move on. We're going to be talking about Xabi Alonso today. Where's he going? Shaka's going to tell you. Well, Shaka's going to guess. But we're going to explain why we think Xabi Alonso will end up going where Shaka thinks he will end up going. Transfer rater, rumor rater, whatever it's called these days, is back, Shaka. Look at the excitement on your face.
Okay. Who's coming to handle that part? Who's coming to handle the first part at all?
Just you and me, boy. Just you and me. And then we'll play a game at the end about who you'd rather have managing your team, playing for your team, and all that. Anyway, let's start with Xabi Alonso. First of all, where's he going? Is he staying at Leverkusen? Where is he going if he doesn't?
Well, let me say, if it were me, I would be going to Liverpool. Okay, all circumstances being exactly the same, I'm thinking Liverpool. But as I say that, I understand the speculation. We had Janaga Fjortoft on FC during the course of this week, and he seems absolutely certain that Xabi Alonso is going to stay at Leverkusen for one more season. Personally, I just don't see it. As a player, you understand, you strike while the iron's hot. When big clubs are interested in you, you move sooner rather than later because you simply don't know what's around the corner. Of course, that's as a player. As a manager, it is totally different for any number of reasons. So while I bow to Jan's knowledge of the Bundesliga and him having his finger on the pulse on all things that are happening on the continent, I kind of start to think that Xabi Alonso is staying at Leverkusen for one more season. For a number of reasons. You look at not just what's happening at Liverpool, not just what's happening at Bayern Munich, but in particular Real Madrid. And Carlo Ancelotti staying on for at least a couple more seasons. And then Real Madrid, you expect, will consider what are their next options. They'll have that next option lined up well ahead of time, you expect. And Xabi Alonso, as we say right now, is the best and most viable answer. That being said, 2 years is a long time to wait. Yep. And while I sympathize with Jan's belief that he's going to stay at Leverkusen, while you understand Xabi Alonso wanting to stay on and show loyalty to a club that has supported him as Leverkusen has done, come the summer, I expect a lot of those same big European clubs to come after a lot of Leverkusen's players. And Xabi Alonso, who's built this squad wonderfully well, you have to say, if a number of those players, as players do, strike while the iron's hot, as per what I was saying moments ago, and that all of a sudden he's left with another rebuilding job, I'm not sure that that's what Xabi Alonso wants to do. So I am... That's the long answer to me saying I have absolutely no idea where Xabi Alonso what he may be thinking, where he may be going.
Okay. Let's say Jan Agafjortov is wrong. Let's say it's a straight choice. Now, you can put yourself in Xabi Alonso's shoes, or you can try and get inside his head. If it's a straight decision between Bayern Munich and Liverpool, weigh up the pros and the cons before deciding which is the best option for him, please.
I think the biggest con around Bayern Munich right now is the uncertainty at boardroom level, which you've seen play out last year. You as continued during the course of this season. And while Bayern Munich, in their own right, you know they're one of Europe's biggest clubs, And while I can criticize the turmoil, you know they're going to get it right sooner rather than later. A whole lot sooner you expect. But still, you contrast that with what seems to be a certain stability around Liverpool Football Club, and you are drawn to that stability. As a manager, you want to be focused on what's happening on the park, building your team, having your team play in a way that you understand and you mold them to do. You do not want to have to be sorting out what's happening upstairs at boardroom level. And you just can't help but feel that that's going to be a significant part of the next Bayern Munich manager's job, whether it's Xabi Alonso or not. But for this discussion's purposes, that's not what Xabi Alonso wants to be doing. And Liverpool, it does not seem to be the case at all. So again, a straight choice between the two. I'm leaning Liverpool.
The Liverpool job doesn't come up very often. 2015, Jurgen Klopp took over. Next year, it's going to be 10 years since Jurgen Klopp took over. So I find it hard to separate them from a prestige-wise. If you've spent your life growing up in and around the English Premier League, you're probably going to have more of an affinity than if you've spent your life growing up in the Bundesliga. You're going to have more of an affinity with that. What's the bigger club?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm tempted to say Bayern Munich at this point. Bayern Munich who've won, 11 titles in a row, and all suggestions are that they won't this time around. You know what you're going to get out of Bayern Munich. You know you're going to be competing at the top end of the table, regardless. You know the expectation is to go deep in the Champions League, regardless. And the expectation is no less than 2, maybe 3 trophies a season. So I think Bayern Munich have set their standards where they are. This season they've dropped decidedly below those standards. And that is as attractive a proposition as any for most. But again, I just think that as a manager, and while to your introduction to this point, Xabi Alonso probably has split affinities in that he grew up in Spain. He does not have the loyalty to a Liverpool that an English player might, or to Bayern Munich that a German player might. While he spent a good part of his playing career at both, he just doesn't have that kind of ingrained loyalty, let's call it. So it's a straight business decision. It's a managerial decision. It's one that maybe doesn't pull on the heartstrings in the way that a certain Spanish club might.
We'll get to them in a minute. My final point on Bayern Munich and Liverpool. If he leaves Leverkusen and decides Bayern's for him, Bayern are going to be favourites for the Bundesliga next season, regardless of Leverkusen and how many points they win it. Liverpool are not going to be favourites for the Premier League. So the likelihood is, if he goes to Bayern, he'd probably win the Bundesliga in his first season. Plus, they're a Champions League contender. Liverpool, Champions League contender, of course, but probably second favourite in the Premier League behind Manchester City. He will always have that Manchester City for the first 2 or 3 years, you would imagine, if it stays status quo, depending on what happens with the financial fair play thing. So from a CV's perspective, is it a better move for him to go to Bayern in regards to potentially what would come after Bayern and where he might stand as a manager in the global game?
That comes down to a belief in your own ability. So let's say we're having another of these conversations in let's say 3 years' time.
Okay.
And Xabi Alonso has won the Bundesliga 3 times, or Xabi Alonso has won the Premier League 3 times. I think winning the Premier League 3 times with Liverpool puts your CV in a far better place than winning the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich.
Champions Leagues in there, by the way?
I'm just saying, and you, in terms of expectation around clubs and the way you phrase the question,
sure,
Bayern Munich will be favourites. Liverpool won't. But if in 3 years' time, we're not talking Champions League, let's just talk straight leagues here. In 3 years' time, You win the Premier League 3 times running, and contrast that with winning the Bundesliga 3 times running with Bayern Munich. Doing it with Liverpool certainly puts you in a far better position in terms of what your CV looks like in 2027. And again, I'm just throwing out 3 years just because, for argument's sake. So there's that. And I've often said, Mark, and I'm sure you've heard me say it, as professional athletes, we have sometimes a fatal self-belief in what you can achieve going into a club. So while, yes, Bayern Munich, you expect if he goes there, again, there's a certain expectation, he'll probably deliver, but you're thinking, listen, if I go to Liverpool and do exactly the same, imagine where that would leave me. That's a thinking that's not really rooted in much logic, but that's a thinking that every single player, manager at the highest level is labored with, for want of a better term.
Okay, final one for this, and we'll get to Real Madrid now. It's another team like Bayern, like Liverpool, that Xabi Alonso has played for. Now, it depends who you speak to. Real Madrid and the managerial position at Real Madrid is up there, possibly as one of the top 3 in world football. Would moving to Bayern Munich now at the end of the season, or moving to Liverpool now and having that success you spoke about, stand him in a better stead to potentially 3, 4, 5 years down the line when Ancelotti eventually leaves, go to Real Madrid?
I don't think spells it either really moves the needle one way or the other. As long as he's successful, as long as he hits the targets that those clubs set out, I don't think either really moves the needle in one way or another. Now, if he's an abject failure at either, well then yes. But if he is even moderately successful at either of those clubs, I don't think that dims Real Madrid's interest at all.
Okay. We have had a question for Shaka Hislop about what's from one of the viewers on our YouTube channels. Was there one club that you would have dropped anything to play for? We see the Newcastle scarf, the West Ham scarf, and obviously your international Trinidad and Tobago colours. Was there one club, if they came calling, you're like, I don't care how much they're paying, even if I have to go for free, I want to play for them? Was there one for you?
It's not one in particular. I would have gone to, I'd have loved to go into one of the kind of traditional big clubs, as in England, Manchester United, Barcelona, or Real Madrid, or Bayern Munich, so to speak. Because growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, I simply did not have that, as we mentioned, that ingrained loyalty or partiality to one club or one country or an absolute other. For what it's worth, coming to the end of my career, I would have loved to go back to Reading, where it all started. Wow. But that's kind of separate, I'm guessing, from the question.
Yeah, I just want to tell a story that you tell so much better, but it was to do with the Bulgarian goalkeeper Bobby Mihailov, who saw Reading on TV and thought when they were playing in the playoffs at Wembley that was their home stadium. Yeah. And then he showed up at Elm Park and it wasn't really what he expected, was it?
No, it absolutely wasn't. And in fairness, Bobby wasn't exactly what Reading expected either, if I may say so. But yes, Bobby Mihailov succeeded me at Reading. It wasn't what your phrasing wasn't what he expected, and suffice to say that the Reading equally couldn't wait to see the other side of Bobby Mihailov themselves.
Okay, well, let's move on to transfer rumours, which is back. And the first one is Shaka Hislop back to Reading. What do you reckon?
It was this close. Well, no, actually it wasn't. I'm still available. If anybody from Reading's watching, I'm available. I've got a pair of gloves somewhere.
Would you be more or less expensive than Erling Haaland to Real Madrid?
Oh, goodness me. I'm fairly certain, I'm not 100%. I'll be less expensive. Yeah. Listen, the Erling Haaland to Real Madrid, that's something that's never gone away.
Every time.
Ever since he signed for Manchester City. The rumor, the speculation was that Real Madrid would be next. It almost wasn't a question that Real Madrid would be next. The only question would be, would it be in 2 years' time? Would it be 3 years' time? Or would it be 4? Listen, in fairness, while others in Erling Haaland's camp has added fuel to that fire, Erling Haaland himself absolutely has not. He has linked his time to Manchester City with Pep Guardiola. I know, as ever, there's continued speculation around him and his future, especially given some of the charges around Manchester City. But as we sit right now, I think Erling Haaland is at Manchester City for at least the next 3 or 4 years. As I said, that can change very quickly, depending on any number of factors. But as of right now, I just don't see it until one of those things kind of happens and tips the dominoes.
And that's the thing, Shaq. We don't know any timing about when there might be an announcement as to any punishment.
Anything, correct.
Do you see a situation perhaps similar to Juventus when they got demoted in the Calciopoli scandal, in that some players decided, you know what, it's Manchester City for me, regardless of what division that they are in? Or do you think it might be a case of, right, that's it, if they get demoted down a division or two, I'm off ski, with regards to Erling Haaland, with regards to Phil Foden and others?
If and I'm happy you call those two names. If let's say Manchester City get demoted, I could quite easily see Erling Haaland moving on. If they do, I could quite just as easily see Phil Foden staying.
Yeah.
For, again, kind of the thread through a lot of what we discussed around affinity, around loyalty to clubs. Phil Foden came through the academy at Manchester City, and while Erling Haaland has an affinity to the club, given he was born in Manchester when his dad was playing there, I'm not sure. Well, I don't expect it to be anywhere near as strong as Phil Foden's, and given the progression of his own career, how he's gone from club to club in advancing his career. If Manchester City go down and Real Madrid come calling, I totally sympathize, and I do not give Erling Haaland wrong for moving on. Saying that, I don't give Phil Foden wrong for moving on. I just don't expect him. I just don't think he would, and under the exact same circumstance.
We can park this now, because you know the next time you're doing the transfer rumors that Erling Haaland to Real Madrid's going to appear. Again, let's just say he may be Xabi Alonso's first Real Madrid signing in 3 years' time. We can tie everything all together. How does that sound? Maybe?
Yeah, I absolutely makes complete sense, especially if Xabi Alonso continues on this trend of as a manager in the way he develops and gets the best out of players. I think any player would love to play under Xabi Alonso. Just the same way that any player would love to play at Real Madrid.
Okay, we're going to move on now as part of the transfer rumours to the next Manchester United boss. Now, Thomas Frank has been linked, as have a number of others. It was Southgate last week. It was Thomas Frank this week. Before we get your thoughts on this, Shaka, there was a bit of an exclusive on ESPN FC yesterday that all the papers in the United Kingdom have picked up on. It's from our very own Mark Ogden. Now, Mark sat down for a chat with James Ollie, with Rob Dawson as well. And the exclusive was to do with a guy who was at Bournemouth and is now the manager of Wolves, Gary O'Neill, and a potential move to Old Trafford, but not necessarily as a manager. Let's hear more from the boys.
I've been told that Gary O'Neill is a manager that United are keen to speak to. From what I've been told, nobody involved knows what exactly the role is, whether it's a manager role or a coaching role, because United are looking at not only assessing their options as a manager, but assessing whether they need to rebuild their coaching setup. So Gary O'Neill obviously done really well at Wolves this season. He's only 40 years old, and I've been told that within the game, he's really rated as a guy that's going places. Now, I don't know enough about Gary O'Neill to know whether that's true or not, but he has a lot of admirers in the game, and United are keen to talk to him. And whether it leads to him becoming the United manager, I doubt. But let's be honest, if you look over the years of the great managers that have been successful, I'm not for this moment saying that Gary O'Neill is going to be the next big thing. Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, Thomas Tuchel, they've all kind of made their mark in their early 40s in terms of set their reputation. There's no point looking at a manager who's in his early 50s, maybe Erik ten Hag. If you're in your late 30s, early 40s, that's when managers start to catch people's attention. Now, maybe Gary O'Neill is the next big thing, and maybe that's what United are assessing, whether this guy who's did really well at Bournemouth last year and has done really well at Wolves, maybe he's the next big thing, maybe he's not.
This intrigues me. I think it's a really good scoop there from Mark Ogden. There's no doubt that, Shaka, they'll be looking everywhere for potential new bosses. I just wonder, given Sir Dave Brailsford's background with Sky and Sir Jim Ratcliffe coming in, I just wonder if they might try something different there. And that would tie in kind of a head coach, like in an American model where you've got your GM, you've got your head coach or something like that. They may go for a kind of overseer of everything and then someone who just takes the players and has nothing to do with the transfers. So talk to me about Gary O'Neill perhaps having a role and maybe United being interested in someone like Thomas Frank.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I find it a little bit confusing, and maybe it's the lack of information and around what that role may be. But if I'm Gary O'Neill, and let me say I know Gary O'Neill. I played with Gary O'Neill at Portsmouth. As it happens, and that same Portsmouth team was Richard Hughes, who's just joined the backroom staff or about to join the backroom staff at Liverpool, and Eddie Howe, of course, manager at Newcastle United. All incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent young players at the time. That's clearly what I thought, and that's kind of how their coaching careers have progressed. So there's no real surprise to Gary O'Neill's rise. Of course, you're never quite certain who will make a good manager. But Gary O'Neill is highly intellectual, and so it didn't surprise me at all just to see him progress as he has. That being said, given his career at Bournemouth, where I thought he did an incredible job, and in my opinion was let go unfairly, right? Did what was asked of him, but somehow that wasn't enough. Found himself in as manager of Wolves, and continues to do an incredible job. Why do you go to a club, even a much bigger club, such as Manchester United, to be part of a backroom staff? I just don't see that. And then the question also is, who is the manager? Maybe you go to be part of a backroom staff for a Sir Alex Ferguson or Jose Mourinho or Carlo Ancelotti, but you don't leave a club in Wolves to be part of Erik ten Hag's backroom staff, or, with the greatest of respect, Roberto De Zerbi, whose Brighton is a point above you in currently in the Premier League table, or to Thomas Frank, whose Brentford is 14 points behind you in the Premier League table, 14 or 15 points. Memory fails me there. I don't understand that. So until there's more clarity around what's being asked of Gary O'Neill, it makes absolutely no sense to me. And to your point, okay, I get it. Ineos coming and are rethinking the kind of coaching structure at Manchester United. But until we know what that coaching structure looks like, again, it's kind of hard to comment on or to make sense of some of the speculation.
I just have this. It's so hard because there's so little info about what kind of structure. Whether there's an overseer, whether there's a godfather in a throne that sits there and there's some sort of managerial committee, I just don't know how that works. And it's not a case of Gary O'Neill perhaps working for X, Y, or Z. You've got Thomas Frank coming in as well. These are all managers in their own right. So is it the pool of Manchester United that an assistant with them is better than a first-team manager's job at another Premier League club? I find that kind of hard to believe.
Yeah,
so until we get
I'm with you. If you're the boss, if you're the manager,
that's different.
It's really hard to then accept a role as having to answer to somebody,
Mhm.
as not being the one on the sidelines,
Sure.
as not being the one making the final decision, even at a bigger club. That doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me.
Okay, we did have Michael Olise to Man United or Man City, but we're going to keep that for the next one. We also had Federico Chiesa to Liverpool. Again, we're going to keep that because we've got some quick fire questions to end Wednesday's ESPN FC Live with. So the first two are either start, bench, or drop. You have to do one thing with each of the three. So
I hate
those are
these.
the first two.
Let me just say straight off the top, I hate these. But carry on.
Okay. Then you've got a one to manage your club. Then which playmaker are you taking? And then would you rather have? So there's 5 topics for you. Number 1, start, bench, or drop. Thierry Henry, Didier Drogba, Harry Kane. Who are you starting?
Goodness me. I start Thierry Henry.
Good.
I just think as an individual, Thierry Henry has the, or certainly had the biggest ability to individually impact games.
Who are you benching? Drogba or Kane?
This is a really, really tough question.
Because you're dropping the other one.
Yeah, that is a really, really tough question.
And we've got 5 of these to get through in the next 2.5 minutes. So
all right. I'm going to bench Didier Drogba and I'm going to drop Harry Kane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's number 2, start, bench, or drop. Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, David Beckham.
Well, why are you going to do this? I'm going to have to pick my former teammate Frank Lampard and start him. I'm going to bench Steven Gerrard and I'm going to drop David Beckham.
Speaking of former teammates, you've got Richard Hughes, you've got Eddie Howe, you've got Gary O'Neill, who are all doing great things in England.
You notice who's the constant at all three, who's been around for all 3.
Yeah, but Shaq, you're sitting talking to me about who you'd start and drop, whereas they actually get to do it.
Well, don't worry, your time is coming, Mark. That's where we're going with this. Your time is coming. You just wait.
Let's quickly wrap this up. One to manage your club, whichever you want at your club. Do you want David Moyes? Do you want Erik ten Hag? Or do you want Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
I take David Moyes all day long.
Good
Easy.
answer. Which playmaker are you taking out of these 3? Mesut Ozil, David Silva, Kevin De Bruyne?
Oh, goodness me. I
don't think there's a wrong answer here.
You know, there really isn't. I Mesut Ozil, I bench Kevin De Bruyne, and I drop David Silva.
That wasn't the question. It was just which one are you taking? But you've kind of...
Oh, all right. There you go.
That's fine. That's okay. And the last one is, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Harry Kane's career or Jamie Vardy's career? Show me your medals, son, or show me your lederhosen and lots of goals. But no
as in right now, because I'm sure the Harry Kane will win medals. Maybe not this season, but he will. So we take it right now. I want the medals. Give me the medals. Jamie Vardy.
There you go. We'll see you